what would happen if somebody like Mike Huckabee, and this isn't necessarily it's not a political name dropping, it's just more of an exploration of the concept this man has proposed. He has proposed a total roundup of all illegal immigrants, a mass deportation.
Completely impractical.
And we know we're on a road to this. They're not going to do it all at once, but we know we're on a road to a time and a place in this country where illegal immigration has... The enforcement of these laws has gripped the population, that there are police in the streets doing searches more often than they are doing today. Many of these things are happening right now today. We've got the police kicking in the doors of business owners and trying to identify all of the employees there, looking through the employee files, trying to determine whether or not the business is harboring an illegal, so-called. How there can be an illegal person, I'll leave that to you to decide. That's a whole other issue. The immigration issue, we'd sure love to talk about it, but I just want to talk about the enforcement side of things, because we're seeing it happen now. We're seeing the checkpoints. There are citizenship checkpoints that exist now within a 50-mile or 100-mile range from the northern and southern borders of this country. So we already have a situation where the police are stopping vehicles and saying, "What is your citizenship? What country were you born in?"
Oh, except for the weird German accent. Yeah, that's exactly what they're saying. They're wanting to know what your citizenship is. They're asking you for your papers.
Right. Now, it's not mandatory yet, as Terry from CheckpointUSA.org has proven by his refusal to answer these questions. But most people will believe it is because of the way the questions are asked.
It might just as well be mandatory.
Right, and before you know it,
what happens if you don't stop?
Oh, yeah, exactly.
It suddenly becomes mandatory.
Right, exactly.
Somebody with gumballs on the top of their car is going to come after you.
Yeah, so it's just going to get worse. It's already happening now, and it's going to get worse. We've got the feds. We talked about this last hour. The feds proposing a national identification card. And, in fact, they're going to be coming down it's coming down to a showdown between the feds and 17 states that have refused to accept it. So, luckily, it's not all happening at once, but boy, if they could make it happen, they sure would. Let's keep exploring this concept, though. What would it be like if the federal government and your local state and local governments were trying to deport every single illegal immigrant from the United States? Well, we'd have to have police officers in the streets night and day in order to track down these lawbreakers. To say the vast majority of them are, of course, nonviolent workers who've aggressed against no one. They're just here trying to make a better life for themselves. To say this would be a messy affair would be an understatement of magnificent proportion. SWAT-style assaults and home invasions would be the order of the day. Today's ruthless, tyrannical drug raids would look tame in comparison as government thugs went door to door seeking out suspected illegal aliens. The right to privacy of citizens and non-citizens alike would consequently evaporate as property rights became a thing of the past. Chaos would ensue. Racial tensions would intensify as primarily brown targets would be ensnared by their primarily white captors. Protests, and although I'm sure there'd be a few Uncle Toms, there are a number of Hispanics that are working for the Border Patrol, for instance. Protests and riots would erupt, the merits of which would be hard to dispute. Now, we've actually, again, talked about the immigration issue on the show a number of times, and when the anti-immigration zealots call in, we've asked them before. If the police came to your house and asked if they could search your premises to see if there were any, you were harboring any illegal immigrants, these people have said without hesitation, "Oh, sure, no problem. I've got nothing to hide." So there's this whole segment of the American population that would be more than willing to allow the police to just come on in. "Oh, sure, officer. No, we don't have any illegals here. Search our house."
Yep. These are spineless, yellow-bellied people that don't deserve to be called Americans. They are not the kind of people that that wrote the Fourth Amendment that said the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizure. These weren't the kind of people that said, we're all hang together because surely we'll hang separately. These people, they've inherited a legacy of liberty that they're willing to squander. They'll just throw it away.
Yep.
Why? For their hatred.
Children born as American citizens would be seized from their parents, automatically rendered homeless, and converted into wards of the state. That's happening today, by the way. as a result of such totalitarian behavior. Human beings who've come to this country to make a better life for themselves and their families would be treated like animals as they were hunted, captured, incarcerated, and eventually deported. And this would merely be the fate of those who complied. Those who resisted, on the other hand, would not fare nearly as well. They'd end up beaten, maimed, tortured, and even killed. If Americans can be electrocuted and shot on the roadside simply for arguing with the police nowadays, just what type of treatment would befall the illegal immigrant suddenly rendered persona non grata via this new Soviet-style diktat? Sadly, this issue says much less about Mike Huckabee than it does about countless American citizens, with whom the candidate simply seeks to curry favor this election year. Huckabee's a sleazy politician, and thus to an extent can be forgiven for behaving like one. This doesn't excuse his most recent stance, but it's very telling that he can get away with it. After all, he's just posturing for an American electorate whose mainstream values are reflected in its president, in whose office we unfortunately place so much influence that one man can be empowered on our behalf to commit wholesale acts of violence against our fellow humans. And if we can identify enemies abroad, so too can we apparently identify local enemies living within our borders. But make no mistake, a mission literally to cleanse our land of unwanted immigrants would more or less amount to a rogue experiment in state-sanctioned domestic terrorism scarcely seen before in the United States, and one that would almost certainly result in civil war. All in response to a hot-button political issue that essentially could be eliminated by doing little more than putting an end to those attractive welfare subsidies that Huckabee and so many of his fellow Americans seem to love so much in the first place. And of course he's right. That is the solution to the supposed problem of illegal immigration, is to end welfare so those who have come here to mooch have nothing to mooch off of, and therefore won't have any reason to come here in the first place. How similar would it be, Mark, if this were to happen? If this mass deportation situation were to actually occur, what would the parallels be like between it and, Nazi Germany? House-to-house searches? A different class of people being sought by the government? It's
disturbing entirely, but I always wonder, these people want to put a fence up on the border, which is an extraordinarily expensive undertaking. Likely not
to mention it just pointless.
I suppose it might stem a small amount of the flow. Let's say that it stops 25%.
They have shovels in Mexico.
Yeah, let's say it stops 25% of people. But how did they sell the Berlin Wall to people? How did they how did they manage to convince them, hey, we're going to build this Berlin Wall, it'll be great, it'll keep all the outsiders out?
There must have been an enemy. There must have been some enemy.
I don't know. Maybe they did, maybe they did. Maybe they just said, you are under our control, we're building a wall. Maybe they said that. I don't know.
That's a good question. If you know more about history, dial on in and tell us. This is your show. You can bring up anything. It's Free Talk Live.